Hey everybody, on behalf of my co-host Faityn Muhammad, we'd like to welcome you to this very special joint Hot 97 WBLS Town Hall on gun violence. We're calling it Ceasefire. What will it really take? We're looking for solutions, we're looking for answers, and we're trying to move this whole discussion forward. The topic and the need for these solutions has never been more urgent than this summer. We've seen a 1-year-old baby murdered in a stroller. We've seen murders rise by 30%. We've seen shootings up about 85%. People want to know why and what's going on, and that's why we're doing this together. Faityn?
Yes, Lisa, and we've all been talking about this. And tonight, we're not trying to play the blame game, but as you just stated, we want to come together, WBLS and Hot 97, to talk about what's going on, and let's talk about some of the solutions of dealing with this critical problem that is affecting our community here tonight. We want to also let folks know that you can submit your questions or comments on WBLS's Facebook page, or you can also go to Hot 97's YouTube page and submit your comments and questions as well. Okay, Lisa, let's introduce this panel.
Get it going. We got an amazing panel, and all night long you're going to be hearing from different viewpoints and different perspectives. Joining us is hip hop artist Casanova, who came off the streets, used music as a way to change his life, and in the process became an international star and earned millions of fans. Casanova, great to have you with us. Also joining us is City Council member Robert Cornington Jr. He represents Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn and Northern Crown Heights, and he has been leading the charge. He's also on the task force, the city task force, with how to deal with this gun violence. City Council member Cornegy, great to have you with us.
Hey, Lisa. Thanks, brother Faityn.
All right, Councilman. Also rounding out this panel is Sister Erica Ford. She is the founder of Life Camp, Inc. That is Making Peace a Lifestyle, an organization located in Jamaica, Queens, New York, that works to reduce violence, especially gun violence, through a range of peace-oriented programs. Good evening, Sister Erica.
Peace, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the discussion.
And also we have Mr. Noel Ellison. He is the uncle of 17-year-old Brandon Hendricks. He was the honor student and basketball star at Monroe High School, whose life was cut short due to senseless gun violence in the Morris Heights sections of the Bronx. Good to see you, Mr. Ellison, again.
Good to see you too, brother Faityn, and hello, everybody.
All right. All right, Lisa, let's start this off and let you kick it off here.
All right. Casanova, I want to start with you on this in terms of what you're seeing happening when you come back to New York and when you're here. What do you see are some of the reasons that so many people are getting involved in gangs and crews? Because a lot of people are saying that's the reason that we're seeing so many shootings right now.
I can't even hear.
Okay, let me go to, while we get—
I can't hear.
Okay, we'll give Casanova some audio there. City Council member Cornegy, and you're on the mayor's task force on this. You have been out in the streets. We've seen you many, many times. It's your district where that baby was murdered in the stroller, which really shook people. How do you give us a big picture of how you see this problem? Because a lot of people say, boy, this really exploded really fast. What's going on? And on top of all the other changes that we have going on in our life, this is adding tremendous stress to people, especially in your district.
So thank you, Lisa. Thank you for allowing me on the panel. I think the first thing I want to say is I've said this for almost a decade, that all violence is a public health issue. And because we continue to look at it individually and with the cases and never really pour the amount of resources in as if it were a public health issue, we keep getting the same results. I feel like I'm in insanity. We're doing the same thing and expecting a different result, which is throwing the police department at the problem to try to stem the tide of this violence. And it's going to take the police plus the community, plus the clergy, plus the elected officials to have sustainable change, or we're going to keep, this is secular. I mean, Erica is going to get on here and tell you that, this has been going on long enough to have to solicit for her help and help with violence interrupters. So we know that this is a continual cycle of violence. So sometimes we have downtime in the violence, but most of the time the violence is up. So it means that there are things that we're not addressing. And the way that we've interacted with the police department is calling them when it's a situation. We're not doing enough prevention. We're not having enough programs for our kids. We're not addressing it as a public health issue. And until we do that, I don't foresee any long-term change that's sustainable.
All right, I want to get Sister Erica into this conversation also. Sister Erica, you have said before that trauma and pain in communities hasn't been properly addressed. What do you think needs to happen in our communities that will help save the lives of our youth in the streets?
The reason why we address violence as a disease is because people are in pain from different things that are happening, the generational trauma, the violence, the trauma that we see in front of us. We got the pandemic, we got police violence, we got poverty, we got no food, and so all of those things ignite trauma inside individuals. And so we have to address the trauma. We have to help people heal. We have to bring resources that can allow people to have quality food, can have quality shelter, that they can be secure and safe in their homes, that they can get a proper education that can allow them to gain wealth and not just earn a living, but gain wealth and shift the dynamic on how they exist in society today. And so we do unconventional therapeutic services. We hire formerly incarcerated men and women who are closest to the problem, go back into the community and help young brothers and sisters do something different and go down a different road in terms of the inability to just pop off and respond to either the police or interpersonal conflict. And so, and I think there's just one thing different that Councilman said is that what is happening right now is not the same as before because of the totality of what is happening before right now. And so
the context, right.
We saw coronavirus. People were in their house for 3 months. People lost their family. People lost their jobs. We don't know if they were in domestic violence houses and so on and so forth. Then we saw an influx of fireworks in our community, and young people didn't have the money to buy those fireworks. So how did they get to our community? We know that the counterintelligence program from the 70s and 80s is back in our community. Then we saw the influx of guns in our community. We saw the use of snitches and operatives to do certain things to ignite different violent incidents with young people, and they might be doing it themselves. I don't know. When I say police, I don't mean police on the corner. I mean operatives. Trump could not have the story of the power police man that he thinks he is if he doesn't create the scenario to address it. And so some of this stuff is being helped and developed by hands that are bigger than ours.
And there's a lot of circumstances going in. Mr. Ellison, help us, because Erica's done a lot of work in the community dealing with the trauma and the aftermath of the gun violence. First of all, my condolences to you and your family over the loss of Brandon, because the more I find out about him, the more extraordinary a young man he is. And I was in the community last week in the neighborhood, and there's so many young men that looked up to him in particular. But what has this loss done for your family?
Well, clearly it's devastating. The pain is probably indescribable. Brandon was a good kid. Brandon was a happy child, and we all loved him. I mean, he was my road dog. We go to church on Sundays every so often. I went to all of his games as much as possible, and it's just that you can't fully explain it. I mean, you hear parents going through these types of trauma in the portion of their life, but I think everybody has their own, for lack of a better term, internal emotional chemistry that has these different ingredients that brought that love for that particular individual who's lost. So although I can hardly speak acutely to describe my feeling, it's just an emptiness that we realize that he's not here anymore. Clearly, there are days where you remember all of the good things that he's done and what we tried to do with him. But I have his picture as my wallpaper on my phone. Every so often I look at it and it brings joyful memories. Every so often I look at it and I kept saying to myself, well, why'd you put that wallpaper on your phone? because there's that moment of acute pain. So it's up and down and all around in that sense. I appreciate being part of this panel, and probably need to pledge to do more work to help out the solution. But I don't want to act like I'm the vanguard of this movement, because you've had people like Erica, Aisha Sekou, who I know and respect very much, who've always been on the forefront of this problem, for lack of a better term, that we're killing each other, and there's some sort of social dynamic that is contributing to this, whether it's outside forces, if you want to go conspiracy, or whether it's just a mentality of people who are struggling. Something is wrong, and as the Assemblyman Cornegy says, we can't keep using the same methodology to try and correct something, because clearly at this point in time it's not working.
Wow, yeah, you hit it right there on home. And again, as Sister Lisa said, you know, I know it's hard for you and your family. How is the mom's holding up?
Well, you know, we speak to her daily, because clearly has the roughest road with all of this. You know, there's the aspect of the difficulty sleeping, you know, the pain where at certain moments she's breaking down. But I think, you know, I mean, in the yin and yang of life, our family, because of this, has gotten closer, you know, and I think we've been overly upwardly encouraged by young people throughout the city who made these little shrines on basketball courts, have sent us good messages, have put tattoos on their arms. It gives an old man like me much faith in the creativity of our youth, and the belief that most of our youth have an idea of what is right morally and physically in that sense. Brandon was groomed to be successful. We demanded that he get good grades. He loved basketball, so we told him he had to work at it. He did what we asked him to do, but he was a happy kid because he followed his path, and we sort of supported it. It's gone now, and I think, you know, that's not the only loss. I mean, in going to his games, I became a parent / mentor to teammates, to people who sat in the stands, young people who I would not have seen had I not gone to see my nephew play. So he was that connection with me and a number of young people who've been inspiring to me, and hopefully I've been inspiring to them. But the more I can be there, they see a mentor. You need more than one Noel Ellison, hopefully. You need more than one Councilman Cornegy. You need more than one Erica Floyd. And it's these sorts of connections and knowing our children that I guess gives me some sense of hope. But again, the strategy has to change, and someone more scientifically acute than I would have to come up with a pattern, and then we'll all sort of give resources and energy to it.
We'll see what it is. Let's see if Casanova, can you hear us? Hey, Kaz, can you hear us? Kaz, can you hear me?
Hello, I can't hear you.
Oh gosh, wow.
Oh, no, you can't hear us?
I hear y'all.
Oh, yeah,
can't
okay,
hear
great.
Lisa.
So Kaz, first of all,
What did she say?
Can you hear us now, Casanova?
I can hear you. I just can't hear Lisa.
Okay.
I didn't hear
So Lisa, I'll pick it up here. Casanova, one of the things you do is you talk about your time being incarcerated and turning your life around by finding inspiration in your music. What message do you have for the young men in Brooklyn and throughout New York City who think gang life is their only option?
I think it goes back to what Erica was saying about how can we help people heal. You know, it's hard, but I think it's a way. I think we meaning the influential people, as far as rappers, as far as people with power, has to start stepping in and doing the things that need to be done. Yeah, programs is cool, but it's like your teacher in class. You know, you don't think he cool, you might not listen to him, but you'll listen to somebody that you consider a big brother, or you're a fan of their music, or somebody that's successful that you saw with your own eyes change their life around. You know what I'm saying? I tell a lot of kids gang violence and gangs is not cool. It's either jail or the cemetery, you know, and a lot of people respect that. And I also teamed up with my brother over here, Primo, a fellow incarcerated brother, to make something called Think Twice. You know, that's why I always have the saying after my quotes. I hope that don't go over your head, because sometimes you don't get it. And when I say I hope that don't go over your head, it just makes you think more like, what is he saying? What is he trying to say? So healing is very, very, very important, because you start blaming people. And especially what's going on with the police now, you can't go to the police. So I think we as a whole have to police ourselves and our community. You know what I'm saying? Because you might not want to go to police because you feel like you're telling, but you can go to somebody that can solve that problem, that's not going to resort to violence, that's going to tell you the right thing to do. Like, you know what, it ain't even that serious. You need help. And like Erica said again, people are dealing with money issues, getting kicked out of their house, their mothers kicking them out or stressing, whatever. They have nothing but the streets, or nothing but gangs, or nothing but resorting to violence. You know, I've been on the internet and I've been watching murders happen with people with corona masks on. A lot of people getting away with murder because the corona mask. So I'm even scared to kind of walk around people with these masks on. It's kind of like dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Not to belittle corona anymore, but there's a lot of things that's starting from this and ending with that now because of corona. You know what I'm saying? It's dangerous, and it's like, how can you tell somebody that's living in Brownsville in the projects to wash your hands and wear your mask, or whatever the case may be, and there's somebody coming up in a project shooting it up with a mask on? You know what I'm saying? How can you tell somebody to heal when they don't even know how they're going to eat the next morning? So my thing is, how are we going to really affect the community from here? See, this is cool. This is dope. This is beautiful. This is like, I love it. But we got to get hands-on. Everybody got to get hands-on. Everybody got to get their hands dirty.
Lisa, I want
to lesson like, yeah, we did that. We put that work in. We did great. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I'm not sure if you still can hear Lisa.
Can I just jump in there for 2 seconds? Because the young man, I don't want to slide over a point that he just made. The young man that he just named, Primo, is one of my workers.
He right here.
And Primo is a young man who last year this time, 3 of his friends got killed in homicide on the same day.
Oh my God.
And we took our peace mobile to his house. He didn't want to hear what we had to say. He didn't want to be part of the conversation. And we took our peace mobile to his house, and we wouldn't leave until he came out. And the police look at him as a gang leader. And the police told us that him and his friends would never stop killing. They're going to revenge. They're going to retaliate. You don't waste your time. We wasted our time. We raised money. We invested resources. We took them out of the neighborhood. We had to physically take them out so that they would not retaliate, so that they can have time to heal, so that they can have time to breathe. And as he said, he's been doing the work ever since. We hired him as a worker, and now he's even working to develop something with Casanova, because you gotta put resources in these folks who are broken.
No, absolutely. And that's been such important work that you've been doing, and recognizing that, and Erica being on the cutting edge of recognizing the trauma that comes from this and that people are going through because of it. But I have a question for City Council Member Robert Cornegy. In terms of when you look at the problem, the references, you know, Erica talked about it, the mayor's talked about it, many officials, including yourself, have talked about this perfect storm of circumstances that led us to where we're at now. So as we try to move forward, what kinds of things do you see that you're able to do, or that the community is able to do, in order to try to change the whole dynamic that's going on now? The fear that Casanova spoke about, and just the trauma of so many people in your community too, in your district, that have loved ones that they've lost to coronavirus as well. So in terms of concrete steps, what kinds of things, you've been partnering with a lot of different people, but in terms of concrete steps, what's on your agenda right now?
Well, I can't overlook, Lisa, the what Casanova said, which is really that this pandemic has exacerbated every inequity in this city for the world to see. So because of this pandemic, we see the inequities in healthcare, we see the inequities in affordable housing. Everything is on full display. I don't know why we wouldn't think that gun violence would be in play too. But specifically what we're doing is where the mayor has put in resources with the police department to increase the number of officers and detectives when there is a shooting it's called the All Out program. And so what we decided was wherever the NYPD goes all out, we're going to go all out with services so that we can provide everything that's necessary so that the next young man doesn't pick up a gun, and that there's preventive measures. So everywhere the police have been this summer in my district, we've been there with services, mental health services, job training and pathways to employment services. We're moving the family who was involved in the 1-year-old killing to another place. Like Erica says, sometimes you got to take them out of that environment.
So they have to look at that every time they walk out their door.
I can't imagine what a family would go through if every morning they have to walk out their door and see the shrine to their 1-year-old baby. There's no way that psychologically you can heal from to Right? You can't ask somebody to heal from that, and they got to relive that trauma every single time they step out their door. So we thought it was a good idea to move them. You can't move everybody, but in this case, in this specific case, to get that family out of that circumstance, so not only could they heal, but they could pivot and go in a different direction. Because if you don't think a 1-year-old mother and father want to retaliate, you crazy, right? Everybody wants to retaliate. I can't imagine what it's like for that family. And I've sat with that family, the mother and the father. They're young people. And this kind of trauma shouldn't happen to anybody, but certainly they're young people.
I want to go back to, and first of all, thank you for those that are on the ground that are trying to make a difference. But I want to go back to Primo and Casanova. And the reason why I want to go back to Primo and Casanova and Sister Erica, thank you for painting that picture of who Primo is and what he was going through. But too many times when we are having these conversations, you know who's left out? It's the young people that we're trying to reach. Mm-hmm. So that's why I want to bring Primo back into this. I want to bring Primo into the conversation. And if Casanova wants to add, I also want to bring him back into this conversation in a sense of a lot of young folks that are out there selling drugs. A lot of folks out there, especially during COVID-19, they don't have a job. They turn to drugs to make money, to take care of their families. We know that that's not the right way to go. How do we start to reach young folks that say they don't care and they pull out guns and don't matter who's in the crowd to shoot whoever they are trying to get? How do we reach those folks that say they don't care? I'll start with you, Brother Primo.
Respectfully, in the streets, it's always a chain of command. Mm-hmm. I don't care. You don't have to be in a gang. You could be from a block, and older figure on the block might tell you what you just did is unacceptable. But before we reach to that, we have to reach to bringing back caring into the neighborhood. At the same time, I get on this panel. I have conversations with the mayor, Miss Ford. This has been a mentor for me since I beat life in prison, and I was going through a lot of different situations. I lost friends left to right. I kind of gave up and I was all in the streets, and Miss Ford, was on my back with that bus and put me in all different type of elements to, elevate myself. If I could change, anybody could change. And then Casanova stepped in and seemed to strive and, wanted to give back to the neighborhood. But at the same time, moving forward, like you can't ask certain questions and not speak to the people that you need the answers from. We could sit on the panel all day and, suggest and come up with certain things, but you got to get hands-on. You have to get all the way hands-on. The places you are scared to go, you have to go those places to get the answers from these people. We got to put resources in the neighborhood. You have to bring back caring into the neighborhood. From certain events and things we go through, we get traumatized, and that's where the healing process comes through, which, Life Camp has, showed me a way of life with that, where you have to, get in tune with the pain that you're feeling. At the end of the day, getting locked up and facing crimes and stuff like that, like I was going through it all. I lived everything and any example that you're going to discuss on this panel. So to have me elevate and, you know, move forward with these type of conversations and find the answers to cure, you know, violence, which is a disease, a mental disease, a physical disease, is something that, you know what I'm saying, us as a whole, as a people, it has no color, has no shape or form. But at the same time, too, we also have to address the fact that the world is going through a pandemic that we never experienced. You understand? Like, we don't have the answers to, you know, how to control these emotions of losing your job, being home with your girl all day, getting caught up, regular life situations that cause things to erupt and people to act out. And as far as violence is concerned, gloves and a mask is a criminal's, you know, that's a gold stone. Like, this is what you dream of. To how OJ, you know, beat his situation. We had gloves and however that played out. So it's a dream. So we have to get some type of containment with what's going on first. We can't dig on violence. Been going on. The numbers been what it is. Police is gonna say what they want to say, but we got to connect back with the neighborhood. We got to follow the steps that, you know, life can't use to save me, which is, you know, get hands on, be there, be annoying.
Yeah, like what he's saying, right? Most important thing I think we need to be hands-on with is convicted felons. You know what I'm saying? Especially the youth. You know, I felt like when I came out of jail, when I was a youth offender, coming out of jail, 16 years old, I had nobody to show me a way. I had no programs to go in to feed my family. And even being incarcerated at 19, coming home 27, I still didn't have no way. You know what I'm saying? If it wasn't for rap, I'd probably still be in the streets. So I think we need to get in them jails, because those are our fathers raising kids or leaving kids for dead with no structure, no parenting, and coming home and still not parenting because they don't know how. I didn't know how to be a father to my daughter or my son, you know? So I think we need to get in the jails too, because when people come home, when these convicted felons come home, they come and poison the streets. Because I used to poison the streets. As soon as I came home, I used to ask for a gun, not money, not love, not a place to stay. I used to be like, let me get a gun because I need some money. You know, that's the mentality of somebody that's institutionalized. And I think once you're incarcerated for over 5 years, you're institutionalized. Whether you be 15, whether it's DFY, Spofford, Horizons, adolescents, up north, all these people are coming home hopeless. And there's people in the streets that's hopeless. So that's like messed up 2 times. So we stop, that's one way to stop the healing. As soon as you come home, we care. We got a program for you. You need to work, we got something for you. You need this, all right, your kids need a babysitter, oh, we got that too. You know, Medicaid to handle that. Because some people don't even know what Medicaid is. Some people don't even know what life insurance is. They don't even know how to fill stuff like that out. You know what I'm saying? When I came home, I didn't even know how to get my driver's license. And I was so embarrassed to ask anybody, I just drove a car without my license. You know what I'm saying? So I think, you know, y'all right with the streets, but we got to touch the jails too, because the jails is coming out and picking them guns up and letting that thing fly, because they don't know no other way. There's no other way. You know what I'm saying? So that's the part I wanted to say.
I appreciate that, Primo and Casanova. And Lisa, they both said, and especially what Casanova just said, Lisa, and I spoke with a correction officer yesterday, and he basically said that Rikers Island is a gang recruitment center. Wow, I tell you. Well, I know our time is running down on us, Lisa.
Definitely a lot to consider, and definitely a lot of topics and points, really great points that have been brought up. We want to thank our guests for this first panel, for kicking it off with us, Casanova and Primo. It's great to have you guys with us. Thank you so much. Erica Ford, an honor to have you on this town hall. Great to have you with us. City Council Member Robert Cornegy Jr., thank you very much for making time for us. And Noel Ellison, thank you so much for talking about your nephew and what your family is going through for us as well. So Faityn and I are going to continue on, but we want to thank our panel. And coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll have panel number 2. We have a lot of questions and comments coming in on the Hot 97 YouTube chat and also the WBLS Facebook Live Facebook Live feed. People were asking, one of the questions we had the team for Casanova was, what would have helped him avoid the gang life when he was growing up? But I think that's, I think he addressed that a little bit, but I think it's also in terms of opportunities as well, because if you're in a community where people are saying, you know what, you don't matter, your life is not as valuable as somebody else's life, then that really has to affect how you look at what your potential is or lack of potential is.
Exactly. And you're right. And it showed what Primo said and both what Casanova said. And they talked about Erica Ford. Those people that are on the ground have to stay on them and show them, when I use the word stay on them, show them that they are loved. Show them that, listen, we are here not only to communicate, it's about communicating both ways. The same way that we want you to listen to us, we will listen to you. That's very important. But also when Primo said a chain of command, there's always a chain of command. That's very important, because a lot of times there are those soldiers that are in the street that are reporting back to somebody that is on top. And a lot of times we are going to the soldiers, but not reaching those that are on top, that are calling the shots, and the shot callers, as we call them. And we need to reach those people that are shot callers, because if we can resurrect them and turn them around, then they can turn their soldiers around. And that's so important.
No, it is. And Faityn, we were talking with Mr. Ellison was referring to Brandon Hendricks' mother, Eve Hendricks, who I interviewed in the Bronx last week, right at the basketball court, where her son was practicing and playing almost every day just outside of their house. There's a huge memorial there. And, Erica has been on the front line of talking about this trauma that the community feels, that people involved in gun violence, whether it's from being incarcerated from it, or whether it's having a loved one or somebody close to them, a friend or family member killed, that trauma is so real. And just to see the depression that so many of these teens that knew him were feeling because of this loss, and they had such high hopes, and they were telling me, we're going to continue on, we're going to do what we know Brandon would have wanted us to do, because he was such an inspiration. And he was really, to see somebody that's that age, 17 years old, who's such an asset to the community, especially in the Andrew Jackson houses in the Bronx, which have gone through a NYPD development where they've been going through so many challenges over the last several years, especially. It was really inspiring to me to just see that even with him gone, his impact was so powerful on those teens. And whatever that was, that needs to be replicated, because that was, it's something that definitely is going to be changing lives.
How often do you see that, Lisa? How often do you see it when another 17-year-old, 18-year-old is looking up to someone that is their peers, that they're trying to emulate? That is so important. And that's what we are trying to get that message out to the children and the folks out here, the young teenagers out here, that listen, you can make a difference. It starts with you. It's not about just the adults. It's about all of us. And I'm just not leaving out the adults.
It is about, Faityn, I'm going to cut you off right there. It is about all of us. And I think all of our next panel is here. So why don't we break
great.
Because that's who we want to hear from. Faityn, you want to start it off here?
I was going to, okay, let's.
Up here. Okay, we got everybody here. I can start off.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're joined right now by NYPD Chief of Community Affairs, Jeffrey Maddrey. And Chief Maddrey has been out in the community nonstop, even before he got the title of chief, trying to repair relations with the NYPD and with the community, using a lot of innovative measures. We're going to find out about those right now, and also how he's really going to plan to get this whole gun violence situation under control. Chief Maddrey, great to have you with us.
Lisa, thank you, and I hope you're doing well, Brother Faityn. Good to see you. It's really tough out here when we're looking at this violence that our communities are suffering. I'm right up here on 143rd in Malcolm X in Harlem, and I just finished hosting a gun violence town hall where I spoke to the community and we addressed the issues of gun violence in the community.
And Chief, I want to hear about that. Let us introduce the rest of the panel, and then
Absolutely.
I want to come to you and hear what you told me you plan to do, which is with the community, Reinvent Policing. Also with us is Kevin Livingston. He's the founder of 100 Suits. He's been doing a tremendous amount of work in the community by giving young people a way to give back throughout this crisis that has challenged our neighborhoods on so many different levels. And a big supporter of our Hot 97 Street Soldiers push for peace from the early days at the Brooklyn Borough Hall. Kevin, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, the team.
All right, and now also joining this panel is the Queens District Attorney, Melinda Katz. District Attorney Katz has been a public servant for over 20 years, having served as a New York City Council member and as a Queens Borough president. She recently announced the arraignment of 3 alleged gun traffickers from Queens in connection with an illegal gun trafficking ring that saw at least 23 guns shipped from Virginia and sold in Queens. As DA, she has detained several new ways the DA's office could be better equipped to keep the borough safe, including a 24/7 gun buyback program allowing any resident to walk in any precinct at any time to turn in a gun. So important. Thank you for joining us, Queens DA Melinda Katz.
Brother Faityn, Lisa, good to see you again. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Great. And rounding out our panel is Sister Ife Sharon Charles-Hewitt. Sister Ife serves as Director of Anti-Violence Programs and Capacity Building at the Center for Court Innovation, originally founded as a public-private partnership between the New York State Unified Court System and the Fund for the City of New York, the Center for Court Innovation. Sister Ife Hewitt, thank you for joining us tonight.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for having me, Brother Faityn and Sister Lisa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, Sister Lisa, Chief Jeffrey Maddrey had already started, so you might as well continue, Chief Maddrey, in the sense of telling us what you are doing out there in, I believe you said Harlem.
Yes. Thank you. And excuse me for moving so fast.
It's all right. You're moving fast. We understand.
We have to, because we're in a crisis right now. But I just finished. I'm up here in Harlem and I'm on 143 and Malcolm X. We just engaged the Harlem community, the Harlem youth, with the gun violence town hall. This is something that we've done already in Brooklyn. We're out in the Rockaways in Queens, and we'll be in the Bronx and Staten Island next week, and we'll continue to do them until we can get some solid solutions on how we're going to address gun violence.
But Chief, you've said you've done these. You've been doing these town halls, and you did a town hall about a week or 2 ago, right at the spot where the 1-year-old baby was murdered. And the question you said to me during an interview, you go, Lisa, we're going to work with the community to reinvent policing. What does that mean? What needs to be reinvented?
Well, let's use the word reimagine. How we're going to reimagine policing.
Okay.
And again, it's just going to be. I'm going to have some pointed questions. We're going to put some scenarios out. And I want people to understand. I want to understand how the community wants the police to address certain situations. People may not understand why we do certain things. When we see large gatherings, and we may break them up because they don't have a permit, it's late at night stuff. And many times we've seen it end with gun violence. And sometimes we try to be proactive in moving people along. And maybe they don't want to do that. But I'm going to ask the community, how would you like me to address that? Would you like me to allow that event to continue to go on until something bad goes on? How do you want me to address that? So these are some of the things I'll pose to the community. I'll look for their input, and we'll see how we can come up with a resolution that'll work best for the community.
Sister Ife, I want to bring you and Sister Ife Sharon Charles-Hewitt. I'm going to call you, I'm going to shorten that a little bit, Sister Ife. As Chief Maddrey, as NYPD chief, and the work that the police department is doing to make a difference in our community. But one of the things that we said is that we must take back our community. We must have, if we're asking the police to have accountability on how they patrol our community and how they communicate with the Black and brown community, we also must have accountability on how we act to one another. And when we are disrespectful to one another, when we are robbing and shooting and killing one another, it's time to step up. Let's talk a little bit about the work that you are doing and the impact that you are having on the ground to curb some of this shooting violence?
I mean, and thanks for that, because I think what happens, and I think too often we forget, and you've heard me say this before, Brother Faityn, I don't think we ever lost the streets. I think we fell asleep on the streets, right? So I'm always hard about people saying taking back something that we never really lost. I think we're in a place right now where we have to look at, we're reactionary at this particular time, but it goes back to what we talked about a couple of days ago. It's about putting sustainable practices in place for a crisis such as this, because COVID is definitely showing all of the holes that we have within the city. But it's time for us as communities to start actually investing in community organizations that have been doing the work for quite some time. It's about collectively moving as a village. I've said this and I'll continue to say this. We as people of color are resilient, but there's also a part for us to be more involved. And how do we become involved? A lot of times, the work that we're doing on the ground is being consistent, right? I call it consistent. We communicate and we are there all of the time. It is not that we leave and walk away when this crisis is done. So when we're talking about work, we've got to talk about putting things into place that when crises such as this has happened, we don't resort or we don't fall back. And so part of the work that we've been doing with the SOS program, because I facilitate over the Save Our Streets, Bronx and Brooklyn programs, is to continue to have people such like Primo and Casanova just mentioned, is getting the real G's on the street that are able to have these kind of conversation. It's about us looking at layers. There's layers to this stuff. I use other words, but since we are here in public, there's layers to this stuff. And that is connecting to all aspects of the community, whether it be NYPD, our brothers and sisters who are currently incarcerated, for when they come home, for Primo and Casanova to say that they can't even fill out an application and they're embarrassed to do that, and they're riding around because of that without a license, goes to tell you to disconnect. And so we need to be connected again. It's like playing chess. You move one piece and you strategize around the others. And so that's what we have to do, and that's what we need to continue doing in the community.
D.A. Katz, in terms of the gun buyback program, that was one of the things that you had put in place during your election. How is that working in Queens? And give us an idea of why you think that's an important piece of getting this gun violence issue under control.
So we got a little waylaid about turning them in at the precincts. We are doing gun buybacks in Far Rockaway and in Southeast Queens coming up in the next few weeks. And Chief Maddrey was such an unbelievable part of that. But Lisa, I want to talk a little bit, I was listening the first half hour as well. You can't prosecute your way out of this. And what's clear from all the discussion that's been happening on this show, you cannot prosecute your way out of this. And, as someone who works every single day in law enforcement and has the honor of working with so many of the Cure Violence and civic groups, Kevin Livingston is on this panel with me. He does amazing work for people coming out of Rikers Island to make sure that they can get that driver's license, to make sure they know how to do an interview, to make sure that they have suits, and make sure that they have a better life and a better path in front of them. I will tell you, as the chief law enforcement officer of Queens County, you cannot prosecute your way out of it. People need hope. People need to be pulled out of poverty. People in the community need to work together to make sure that we are getting folks who have done time, real state time, to come down to our schools and talk to our young people and be on the streets to show that there are mentors and people that they can follow on a better path. We just instituted with the Queens Defenders the opportunity to run a justice center out in Far Rockaway. And this justice center, once the courts start working full time, is going to be the place where if you're up to 24 years old and you're from Far Rockaway, that you can go there to get arraigned. You can go there to have diversion programs. And we are specifically doing that with Queens Defenders to get the community folks involved. The reverends, the teachers, the PTAs, the civic leaders, the Cure Violence, the violence interrupters. And we want them to be involved in the process of how the future of our young people go. So I agree, Councilman Cornegy said it's a public health issue. There is no doubt. I just prosecuted with the police department, who are amazing on this issue. It's really, an undercover police officer worked the entire time during COVID. And we prosecuted 4 people who are bringing guns in from Virginia up the iron pipeline. But if you get rid of shooters and you prosecute them, there's other people who are just going to pick up the mantle and go right in their place. And that's where we need all of the great folks that are in the community to make sure that doesn't happen.
Step in and speaking of people in the community who are trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. Mr. Livingston, tell us about why you feel it's so important to be there on the ground with everybody.
Well, for me, thank you so much for having me on. First and foremost, it's important to have hands and feet on the ground so that we can understand the community. For me, something that Casanova said, which speaks volumes, is that you're right. You have to have programming inside of the jails to build relationships with these men and women before they come home. I for one, have been in Rikers Island for the past 5 years, and a lot of people think that we just give out suits. I've been in the day room where we're teaching them GED, entrepreneurship. I brought in DMV applications. I brought in voter registration. We've talked about the stock market. This happened in the day room. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that when we started our senior delivery program back in March, before COVID dropped, we made over 10,500 home deliveries to senior citizens. That was ran by men and women who we hired off the day room in Rikers Island to do the work. And so he's right. You have to get behind the bars and build relationships. Because when you build relationships behind bars, you build trust in the community. And so I'm blessed that we've been able to do that. And my staff right now who do social distance ambassadors are all from Rikers Island.
I just want to say that you all are talking about community. And just remember, that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So that's so important, and that's why we come in with so many angles. But my question now, it goes to both DA Katz and to Chief Maddrey in a sense. So let's take a look at the amount of guns that have been taken off the streets so far in this past 7 months in 2020 compared to last year. Are we seeing more guns being taken off the street so far this year compared to this same time last year?
I'll let Chief Maddrey talk to the numbers if I can. I will tell you, though, however, in Queens County, shootings have gone up exponentially. Shootings year to date is 103. Last year at this time, it was 64 shootings. So there is no doubt that with everything we know, there are a lot of guns on the street, and it seems to be much more to me. As far as getting them off the street, we are making arrests and still prosecuting for guns, while still trying to make sure they never end up in our courthouse at all. And that is the ultimate goal, to make sure they never end up at us at all.
And Chief Maddrey, Commissioner Dermot Shea said that this past week there are about 2,100 open gun cases, people with guns who have been arrested for gun possession or a gun charge, about 2,100 walking on the street because the court system is closed. And that's one of the reasons why we have seen this strong uptick in violence, along with all the other factors that we've been discussing. What's your take on that?
I mean, just to answer both questions, when you look at guns, and I just pulled up our current numbers, we're about 200 less gun arrests than last year, but our arrests were up earlier in the year, so we are seeing a little decline in gun arrests recently. But right now, we're about 200 less for the year. And to the commissioner's point about the court system and grand juries and things, it's something that it is affecting us. We're seeing felony charges that we want to see better outcomes when they're brought in front of grand juries and things like that not happening at the moment because of the pandemic, and it's hurting us because people who we think should be in jail right now, felony arrest, multiple felony arrests. And I'll tell you one thing that really hurt me. We lost a 17-year-old in Brooklyn last week. The day before, he was arrested for 4 felony robberies, and he was right back out, and he was gunned down the very next day. So 4 felony robberies, I think he should have been sitting in jail for a little while until we could figure out exactly how it was going to be handled. And he went right back out from a 4 felony arrest and wound up getting gunned down in the streets, 17 years old.
And that's a tragedy. But Chief, let me ask. We have a question actually from the Hot 97 YouTube audience. Everybody asking from Anna from Harlem. This is for Chief Maddrey. She says, how can the NCO, that's the Neighborhood Coordination Officer, I think I have that right, program that was developed a few years ago, how can that address reimagining NYPD and also help with the community relations, especially when tensions with police have been so high?
Absolutely, and I want to answer that, but I'm going to finish answering the question. All I want to say is I wanted to echo the thoughts of the district attorney, the Queens district attorney. We can't prosecute and we cannot arrest our way out of this situation. That's why I'm happy to see what my other panelists who are working out here in the community to provide hope and resources to our community. They need that hope. They need those resources. The police department and the district attorney's office have to be the last part of this equation. Community resources, family, school, house of worship. These are the things that we need to see more. The NCOs, our neighborhood coordination officers, we want our officers to be connected with our community. We want them to be able to work closer with the community to figure out how we can address things, how we can capture some of these young lives, bring value to some of these young lives, bring them to the resources of my co-panelists and make sure that they can use their resources to help these young people instead of me and the DA having to deal with them. So that's why it's so important. The neighborhood coordination officers have to be a positive resource in the community, working along with the community, identifying trouble, and bringing that trouble to the good resources before it has to come to law enforcement.
That was the direction I was going to go in the sense of before you get hold of them in the streets, Chief Maddrey, and then District Attorney Katz. I want to go to Sister Ife and you, Brother Kevin, in a sense, what are the young folks saying when you are approaching them and talking with them and saying you need to change the way you are living your life? The direction you are going in, you're going to be in jail or you're going to be 6 feet under. You need to change your life. What are these young folks saying? The reason why they are doing the things that they are doing? And part two is what can be done to make them change? What are they saying on that?
You guys are Stephen.
Okay. Peace, Kev. It's funny. I don't do direct work as often as I used to. And back in Brooklyn, overseeing a project, and you've heard me say this before, I snatch kids up off the streets in a loving way. I'm part of that village that believes you got to just snatch them up a little bit and give them some love. And sometimes when you ask that question, why are you doing this? Honestly, they don't even have an answer, right? This idea about death and fear in death and fear in jail, the persona does not even allow them to get to that point to even understand what fear is or what incarceration is. And so when we talk about what you do, you continue to have these conversations. I tell people all the time, when I look at this work that we do, you have to align it with someone who's Alcoholic Anonymous. An alcoholic just isn't giving up the bottle just like this, right? They need someone to continue to coach them and be a sponsor and make yourself available. So when you talk about what resources that we have for teams, when we start talking to a brother or sister out there that don't even understand why they're involved, because we forget that these children's minds have not even fully been developed. And so when they can't even answer or articulate because they don't even have the vocabulary, the emotional maturity of the vocabulary to explain what they're talking about or why they're even involved, it is the responsibility of us as sponsors, as credible messengers, to then be able to continue to be that bug in your ear, to talk to them and to talk them down off of the stuff that they're doing. But additionally, this is the part that I always say to people, you cannot sign up to do this work and not be responsive when a young person calls you. That is neglect. You might as well then be incarcerated because you just neglected someone who has the potential to create great harm. But I'm going to yield and let Brother Kevin speak about it because I think, we can go on and we don't have enough time. But the reality is that they'll talk to you. They don't even understand it. They don't have fear. And thirdly, it is our responsibility to continue to be that bug and to give them the resources. Because one of the things they'll say to you sometimes, if I give this up, what you going to give me? Right? Like, what you going to give me? That's what they normally say. And so the question is, what you have to give them can't be just for a day. It has to be consistent.
Kevin?
And just echoing that, she's absolutely right. It has to be consistent. I know personally what it feels like to walk to a young man inside of Horizons and Crossroads when they came off of Rikers Island and was able to let them know that they matter. I also know what it's like to go and tap a young person in his cell on Rikers Island to let him know that his life matter. A lot of people don't know on Father's Day, we write cards and hand it to them in the jail cell to let them know that they matter. I right now have 9 young people in our community that we hired off the street. 4 of them are active gang members. I didn't go through no whole interview process. I went up to them and said, I'm going to hire you, you, and you. They have a job right now paying full-time pay over the summer, cooking meals for senior citizens. One thing they learned about me is they learned time management, they learned culinary skills, they learned teamship, entrepreneurship, and most importantly, they learned that they matter. We cannot normalize community violence. You know, the Nashawn Plummer, the Sean Plumbers, Amir Griffins, their life matter. We cannot be angry for the moment. It has to be consistent. We have to be pissed off for what's going on in our community, but always we have to continue this here. Because I tell people all the time, it's got to the point we started normalizing community violence, and I will not go for that. I will make sure that these lives stay relevant in our community until we start putting the guns down and putting resources in their hands.
Lisa, you know, I just want to say this, Lisa. One of the things that some of the folks are saying on the WBLS Facebook page is they're mentioning about homelessness, and they're also talking about the trauma that a lot of folks have to deal with COVID and just the stresses of life, and how we don't have enough mental health counselors or facilities for folks to deal with these type of issues. So it becomes a revolving door. And also, you got to realize, dealing with the whole COVID-19, a lot of folks have been let out of Rikers Island. And from what we're hearing is that they were put on a bus, dropped off in Queens or another part of the city, given a Metro card, and they had to fend for themselves.
I mean, you know, this is frustrating because part for this to me is that we're looking, I wish that we would invest in researchers to see what the factors are going to be around this post-COVID, because a lot of that is going to contribute to the way that we are managing and dealing with folks. Like, there is research that needs to be done, because this pandemic has definitely opened up a lot of things that we as New Yorkers have not been truthful about. And so I wish we would invest in this city in having some researchers look at the damage of what COVID is going to do, and then instill. Kevin said something just now about the fact that a lot of us don't even like to come and do these town halls, because many of our folks out there will do this because the cameras are up now, right? But we're the ones that are there consistently. We're talking to Eve, to Brandon's mother. We're talking to the 1-year-old, Develle's mother. They're calling, they're reaching out for services. We talk about mental health. We are a city walking around with folks who have mental health issues that no one has been able to diagnose because they cannot speak about it, right? And so I think it's for us, it is in our best interest as a city that we reinvest in monies to support the needs of individuals who have trauma that can't even speak it. We are guilty if we don't speak for them. We
have that NYC Thrive program, but Kevin, let me ask you, in terms of the program that you have going on, could that be replicated in other boroughs? Could that be replicated and multiplied to affect a lot more young people in that circumstance?
Absolutely. You know, the beautiful thing about the program is that we didn't wait on any kind of city funding. We actually went to regular, everyday Joe Schmo to invest money to get our youth hired. We had the support of our great acting borough president to help us finalize everything. But yes, it can be absolutely replicated. You just raise the dollar amount and you get started with the young people. The main thing is that you got to get in front of them. That is the main thing. People talk so much about what the young people listen, what the young people that, and I'm tired of being on panels where there are no young people on them, right? The young people who we need to hear from need to be on these panels.
Exactly.
And so yes, the program can be replicated. We just got to raise money and get these young people hired.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you. We have to move on, but Faityn and I and everybody, our team at WBLS and Hot 97, want to thank this panel for making time to be with us and talk about these issues. Queens DA Melinda Katz, NYPD Chief of Community Affairs Jeffrey Maddrey, Sharon, Charles-Hewitt. Thank you so much for being with us. And Kevin Livingston, thank you for being with us. And thank you to everybody that is blowing up the comments. We're going to get to our next panel in just a moment, so stay with us. Thank you all for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And you see there, Lisa, you know, each panel we're finding out more and more of issues that need to be discussed and part of the conversation. And, you know, this is not the end. This is just the start of something that we are going to be doing on a consistent basis. And of course, you do it on Street Soldiers, on Hot 97, and of course, over at Open Line. We also make sure that we pass the baton of information out to the public, because it's so important here, you know, talking about these type of issues and trying to bring help for the folks that need the help.
Absolutely. And I think we have our next panel that is here to join us. I think we do have our panel here. Yes, we do. We have everybody there.
Almost there.
We're almost there. Okay, we have our, but I think the other issue too is, you know, there are certain programs that the city has. They've created a lot of things very, very fast, but clearly that mental health piece is on people's mind, and that plays some kind of role. I don't know if they can measure it in the statistics, but that definitely plays a role. And I think what Kevin Livingston was saying, where, you know, he didn't wait to get funding. He just said, okay, let me make this work. Let's do what we need to do and get this happening. And it's really letting people, and I think a big part of it, what's emerging, Faityn, from all the conversations that we're having in this town hall, is that we're all interdependent, and that people really need to understand they have a place, they're wanted, and they can make a contribution, to give them an opportunity to make a contribution instead of feeling like outsiders, instead of feeling ostracized because of what they may have done or mistakes they have may have made in the past.
Exactly. And also, just like Primo and Casanova said, and just now, what Kevin said, is that we need to talk to those folks that are out there in the streets. It's not an easy conversation at times. Sometimes it's hard to get these folks to come on because they're involved in criminal activity.
Right, and they just don't want to be out there like that. But when you look at what happened, and it was called in the media Cypress Hills. People might say it's East New York, but on Vermont Street this past week, you had two teenagers, a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, at 6:40 on a Sunday evening, which is still light this time of the year, playing basketball in a small neighborhood basketball court. And they, it's a drive-by. The shooters go by in an SUV with the sunroof open. They the gunman opens fire, kills two of the teens, wounds the third one. Then Faityn, the next night, Monday night, they have the memorial set up. And while another guy I think he was 22, he's in his early 20s, he's mourning the loss of the two teens who were gunned down there. He's shot in the arm and wounded by these two shooters that, it's been a 90 plus degrees out all week with hoodies on, all covered up. Like Casanova was saying, covered up with everything, running down the street, just reckless, like just shooting right at him. So it's that type of thing that I think people are feeling like, wait a minute, this is out of control. And, there are a lot of factors and there is a lot being done, but it's just I think the urgency of it was also underscored by what Kevin Livingston said, which
exactly. I think
this can't become the new normal.
It can't. It can't. I'm sorry to cut you, Lisa, only because we have the next panel here.
All right, great.
So let's bring the next panel in here and let's get them introduced. And we'll just stay consistent, Lisa, and you can go ahead and start to introduce, and then I'll follow with the rest of the introduction.
All right, Faityn, thank you so much. Well, joining us for this panel is Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Eric, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Tony Herbert. He's a Brooklyn resident and community advocate. He's been very outspoken on the gun violence issue. Tony, great to have you with us.
Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
All right. And also we have New York State Senator Brian A. Benjamin. Senator Benjamin is the New York State Senator for District 30, which encompasses Harlem, East Harlem, and the Upper West Side in a New York State Senate. Brian has distinguished himself as a leader in criminal justice reform. Thank you for joining us, Senator Benjamin.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and another family member of this radio station is Sister Aisha Sekou, a longtime community activist. Sister Aisha Sekou is the founder of Street Corner Resources, a nonprofit organization founded back in 2005 and tasked to help decrease gun violence in Harlem. Harlem Street Corner Resources was born out of a concern over gun violence and gang activity amongst Harlem youth. Thank you, Sister Aisha, for joining us this evening.
Peace and blessings. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Borough President Eric Adams. Hi, Aisha. How are you? Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Let's start with you. You've been with us at Hot 97 with the Push for Peace for years at Brooklyn Borough Hall, talking about this issue. People are asking us, what are the solutions? What can really be done? Give us your view. If you could make all the decisions on what would be happening in the city right now, what would you be going for?
I think there's a multi-pronged effect, and I see both Aisha and Tony and Senator Benjamin, these have all been soldiers fighting this real battle. Number one, I think that we need to really examine how so many handguns get into our city, and we need to finally acknowledge the real crisis that America is having is handguns. I say this over and over again. There's almost twice as many deaths and shootings come from handguns. We focus on assault rifles, AK-47, because those are suburban issues, and the victims, for the most part, unfortunately, are white. But the predominant number of Americans that are shot are in the inner cities, the Chicagos, the New York cities, and their handguns. We need to deal with that in a very real way. Second, what Aisha is doing, and so many others, we need to create a new ecosystem of public safety. It can't be just proactive or reactive, it must be proactive. And what is happening on the ground with many of these CMS teams and other organizations need to be properly funded, so that not only do they stop the retaliatory shootings, which is a real problem, but also let them have resources, employment, counseling, dealing with housing issues. When you start dealing with those underlying issues that create violence, you could turn around a lot of this gun violence in a very real way. Lastly, on my thoughts, 18 to 24-year-olds, when I walk the streets and talk to them, many of them are unemployed, not in school, are doing nothing with their lives. And you know what? You don't have to be one of our elders with the great saying, but an idle mind is the devil's workshop. We need to let our young people have some real resources and alternative to prevent this. And finally, I'm a big believer. I know many people don't share it, but we need to institute a different version of anti-crime, not the street crime version, but a different version. Policing can't be predictive. Right now, bad guys would tell you, if you don't see a blue and white, you don't have to worry about Popo being on the street. You cannot be predictive in public safety. You must be predictive in having the blue and white as omnipresent, and you need to be unpredictive by having a real up-to-date version of anti-crime where it's right supervision, not the cowboys, but people are going to do precision policing.
I want to bring Tony Herbert on this, and Tony, I want to springboard off what Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams has just mentioned, because both you, Tony, and Brother Eric have been talking about that the anti-crime unit should be put back into the police department and back on the streets to fight this uptick in crime and shootings. And also, let's just bring into this conversation early, Tony, you've been talking about this for years and it has not been implemented. And I know you talk about it over and over and over. Let's put this on the table early. You talk about that there needs to be stronger gun legislation so that folks that are using handguns, that if they get caught, or convicted, that they go to jail for a longer period of time? Talk about both of those things, Tony.
Well, one, Eric has hit it right on the head when we speak about a real modernized version of the anti-crime unit, because they were the ones getting the intel. They were the ones that knew exactly what information was being generated, so where they knew to go get these guns. Keep in mind, the guns aren't just coming in the back of people's cars. The guns are coming in on these cheap buses in Chinatown. The guns are coming in on the megabus. I mean, at the end of the day, it's supply and demand. So there is definitely a whole bunch of people out here who want access to these guns because they need to protect themselves on the street. And there are a lack of programs in place to do just that. So they got to actually try to be, survival of the fittest. But what you're speaking to is what we've been calling for a number of years, and we talked about it on your live yesterday as well, is that those that have these guns don't get the memo or did not get the memo that speaks directly to the thought process that New York has the toughest gun laws. Because truth be told, if that were the case, they did not get this memo, which means the guns are still going off and whatever we have in place is not working. I know on a prior live, we had a conversation with Brother Benjamin with regards to getting his colleagues, these senators and the assembly folks on board where there might have been some resistance because they thought that it would apply to bringing back some type of form of the Rockefeller drug laws where black folks would be specifically targeted because there's allegedly, and I think it is just a discriminatory thought process, that we would have the guns. So I have a problem with the thought process of what's happening. Yes, we have to be proactive. Yes, programs have to be in place. We have to give money to people like Aisha who's doing the proactive stuff. Those are the programs that are working. Those are the templates that we can say are effective. I can't say that about all the groups. I can only speak to a handful of them. Then couple that with the thought process that we have to send a message. You cannot have a gun on our street. And when it's all said and done, if you do have a gun, you will face, and this is what we've been talking about, because again, we talked about an unscientific program that we did where we hung out with and Eric was actually with us the day before, because we had turned in a gun. If you remember, Eric, we turned in a gun at the 73rd Precinct. I think it was a little shotgun. We turned that in. But the next day, we got out with the shooters, had pizza with them at one of the pizzerias, right, the Sal's Pizzeria on Pickett Avenue. Sat in the back, had a conversation. It was about 8 of us, 8 of the young brothers and three community leaders. We sat there, we asked them the questions. We were jiving around, talking, and then we eased it on in. Well, what do you guys think about these mandatory gun laws that says that if you get caught with a gun, you're going to be facing 2 or 3 years? You know what these kids said? Literally, I can do that standing on my head and I'll come out with honor. That's what they said to me. Then they turned around and we asked the question, if it was 5 to 7 years? I won't have it on me. I'll probably have it in the mailbox or in a paper bag or a paper chip bag close by, but I'm not going to get caught sleeping. But then we asked the question, if you were facing 10 years, a decade of life in jail, mandatory, no conversation, and that's not even associated with what the gun crime would have been that you had that gun for, and you're going to jail for 10 years and there's no conversation. You know what was said to us? Dead silence, and then said, well, 10 years is a lot of time. So what did they just tell us right then and there? And this is what we've been saying to these elected officials, that if you raise the minimum of the mandatory possession of guns, illegal guns, not to violate the Second Amendment, right? But if you raise those laws and what have you, we will be sending a message clearly that if you have an illegal gun, you're going to jail. And nobody wants to do that for 10 years. It's a decade. But it has to be supported by a sustained campaign on TV and radio, getting that message out. Do not carry these guns. New York does have the toughest gun laws. And I don't want to hear nobody come back with the craziness about the fact that it's about we're going to be violating other black folk. Black folk ain't carrying the gun. It's criminals that are carrying the guns.
Aisha, in terms of, we have a comment on the YouTube chat from Patrice, and she says that she believes a lot of the guns are on the streets here in New York City because people are using them. They're running the guns or they're using the guns in terms of drugs, and it's all about making money because people don't have jobs. What do you say to that?
Yep. Is that Aisha or me?
This is Aisha.
Okay.
That's to you,
Do we have Aisha?
Yeah, she's there. You
Yeah.
muted?
Yeah, I was, but now I'm here.
Okay, good.
The question was for me. So, one, anytime that we talk about guns, we have to talk about legislation. And, I remember when I first was talking about this, people were saying, well, that's a white people issue, not our issue. It's all our issue because of certain legislation or not having certain legislation, guns are being sold in flea markets every day, all across the country. So it doesn't have to be in New York. Someone can travel to a place like Kansas, where they have gun shows and flea markets, or Texas, and buy guns and drive them right back here, all suited up. They pay people, straw buyers, to go and purchase the gun, dress up, and they don't look like me or you, because we'd probably be stopped somewhere along the way. They look like other folk, white folk, Asian folk, Indian folk, who need money, and they make that money to drive up guns. So one of the things that we have to do is know that any issue around guns, as long as guns are coming into our community, it's our issue. We can't say it's black or it's white, it's only them and not us. It's all of us, because guns are showing up everywhere across the country and taking the lives of not just young people, but our elders who are just trying to go to the supermarket or just do some daily living things. And then, of course, small babies who are just out with their parents, who have no control over what happens in their community. So we have to make sure that we keep guns out. So one thing I want to tell people is that on congress.gov, you can go and see all of the bills that have been presented, or proposals that have been presented for approval to become law, are still sitting there, some as long as 10 years. So one of them is closing the gun show loophole. I don't have the bill number in front of me, but that is still sitting there. That's sitting there because of the NRA. The NRA is empowered with politicians to keep them with campaign money and money for influence, so that they don't do anything about the guns. So what we have to figure out, and I'm not, I learned all of this doing the street work on the street. I said I had to learn about legislation and how does things become law and what can we do. So the bill to close the gun show loophole, which means that Aisha couldn't go down south and buy a gun just because she wanted to. There would be a wait period, there would be a universal background check, and a whole host of other things that happens to make sure that my mental capacity is well enough to have a gun and all of that. And you have a wait period. So none of that happened. So we have to work to close that gun show loophole. That's the first thing, because people who are able to purchase guns go in and purchase in high quantities, move from show to show, and come back up here with a trunk load of guns. Okay, in one day, and in 2 days.
Since we're running the clock, I want to bring in New York Senator Brian Benjamin.
Yes.
Senator Benjamin, first of all, let me just say this about Senator Benjamin. He is the type of politician that puts his backing behind what he says, and he's helped fund street corner resources in the sense of putting their bus on the road to move around Harlem to get the message out. So I just want to give him kudos for that. But I want to bring you into the conversation because Tony Herbert brought up about the legislators and your colleagues in a sense of possibly having an issue with tougher gun laws. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I want to thank you and Lisa for staying true to these issues, and I thank my panelists for always being on the fight. I start off from the premise that guns don't, individuals shoot guns. And I believe fundamentally that we can have the most aggressive gun laws in the world that still does not stop someone from having a legal gun and killing someone. And so, I think the first place to start this conversation is looking comprehensively at what is our public safety strategy, particularly in New York City, and sort of rolling it out from there. I mean, I'm still stuck on the conversation of what should the police be policing and what shouldn't they be policing. I don't think we figured that out. And this number of us were fighting for was for groups like Street Corner, some mature violence groups, to actually get distance and contracts to be out here helping to do that and not have the police out here doing that. So I still think we fundamentally need to have a comprehensive, thorough, citywide conversation as to what we want police to do and what we do not want them to do, and how do we look at comprehensively public safety, because Eric, law enforcement is the only answer when it comes to public safety, right?
We're fighting through you.
I think we're freezing. I think Brian's
He's frozen
up there. Okay.
But can I address that real quick?
Sure.
I'm with all due respect, I think Brian's a great guy, good legislator, and what have you. But that smoke and mirrors politics to me. When it's all said and done, and I've seen some comments saying that we shouldn't punish. Tell that to the mother of DeBelle Gardner, that we should not put those individuals that pulled that gun out and killed her child, that we should not punish them. Tell that to the 17-year-old that was shot because of gang activity over in that area, because some gangs want to take that park back so they can sell their drugs. Tell that to these parents like Natasha Christopher, who lost her son Akil, who was shot in the back of his head. Tell it to my brother, who lost his son because some coward put 2 bullets in the back of his head. Let's stop playing around here. The blood of what's going on in our community that's pouring in our city is because elected officials is trying this ultra-liberal stupidity, and it's costing people's lives. The individuals that shot that father that was walking across the street with his daughter, that individual was let out of jail on June 11th and turned around and shot that father a few days later because they wanted him out of Rikers Island because of politics. Let's just keep this real. Let's stop playing. People are dying out here, and they're playing politics on these lives.
So am I back on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, am I good? Okay. So I don't want to get into a back and forth with Tony. I first of all, I do believe that those who commit crime.
Oh, we just lost Brian again.
Right. We're going to have to continue.
Can we bring in Eric Adams, because he was a formerly with the NYPD for many, many years, rose through the ranks, I think, to inspector or deputy inspector was the highest rank. He fought also within the NYPD for changes that were going on. Eric, in terms of this issue of the response, because there's this idea we heard from Chief Maddrey saying they need to reimagine policing. How do you what should the cops be doing now, and what should they not be doing, especially in this climate where a lot of people, where there's a lot of hostility between police and the community, and a lot of suspicion both ways?
And a great question. And I retired as a captain, but that's a great question. And I believe this is a great opportunity to build a term that I use often, build a new ecosystem of public safety. What does that mean? Number one, we need to be proactive with some of the police dollars. In the last 4 years, policing budget went up about $1.2 billion. I say you can drop the head count. 90% of the budget is head count. You can drop the head count without dropping patrol strength. Well, how do you do that, Eric? Civilianize the department. Think about it for a moment. If you hire someone to be an electrician at your house, but every time you come home, he's watering your yard, you said you didn't hire him for that. Police should be doing public safety. That means stop having them do telephone switchboard operators. There's no reason you need a gun and shield to be in the barrier detail, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. All of these units where people are assigned to because they know someone or because they don't want to do patrol. No, let's put them on patrol. Then let's change the assignments. What does that look like? We don't need police at parade details. You could have trained civilians at a cheaper cost doing crowd control. Police officers don't have to respond to accidents. We can stop police officers. We spend almost $600 million on overtime. Why aren't we using telecommunications to let police talk to the DA or talk in the courtroom and then go back on patrol? If we take our police manpower and just have them do public safety and have a cheaper, a civilian population, which is cheaper, do those other ancillary tasks, we will have a safer city and a more responsive city. And that's how you reimagine the ecosystem of public safety.
I also think, Brother Eric, that what we need to do is we need to broaden the police department. I think that if a call goes out, for instance, there was a young lady named Mary Mitchell up in the Bronx. She was having a mental episode, and the mother called for assistance. And when the police got there, one thing led to another, and this woman was shot dead. So I think that when we call 911, it needs to be broadened in a sense of how folks that are in the police department, there are different departments to deal with different things. But I want to shift this question to Sister Aisha.
Can I come back in real quick? Am I good?
Hold on one minute, Brian. I want to present this to Sister Aisha because one of the things that we're still working on is bettering the relationship between the police and the Black and brown community. But one of the things that we've been talking about is what we need to do to have accountability among ourselves in our own communities. And Sister Aisha, I believe a lot of these young folks are looking for us to step up to help save the good kids. The good kids are saying, listen, we're going to school, we're doing what we need to do, but we need help. We need protection from those that are doing things that are wrong. How does your organizations and organizations like you provide that type of assistance?
Thank you. So one of the things, I have this belief that they're all good kids, that situations and circumstances, not having parents who are able to raise you in the way that you see other young people being raised, not having guides in the community, people who pay attention and direct your steps, creates what people sometimes use the terminology, the bad kid. The bad kid is developed and created. They're not born that way. So this is twofold. One, there's accountability on the part of the community to kind of do what was done for a lot of us. When my mother wasn't home, and it was 5 of us, the whole block kept us on check. Miss Santiago, Miss Cat, all of them. We didn't like that they were looking out the window, but they kept us in check when we weren't supposed to be outside, homework done, all of that. I really feel like we have to return back to some of the old community way of being. Maybe not all of it.
Aisha, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we just have a couple of minutes. And I think we got Brian Benjamin back again on a signal. And we have
the last thing that I want to say, Lisa,
but we just have two literally like 2.5 minutes.
Let Brian have it. He's my senator.
And he hasn't
Sure.
been able to. Brian, go ahead. I know I'm not even going to ask you a question. Go ahead with whatever you wanted to say to all these things that have been brought up here.
Let me just be very, very brief. First and foremost, I believe that, as Aisha just said, all of our kids were born, and if they are gangbanging, that's because of some of the issues that we have. They weren't born that way, okay? Now, when we talk about this issue of liberal legislators, I am a very strong believer that we need to hold people accountable. But part of that has to be, we need to hold ourselves accountable as to the system that we have out here. We need to have more resources going to groups like Street Corner Resources. We need to have more resources that are going to the organizations and are going to provide education and funding to help with economic justice. Some of these young people out here, they're coming out of jail. There's no job for them. We are not doing what we need to do. And while I am very clear that we need to make sure that we keep our community safe, and I feel for anyone who has been killed because of incarceration, but I also believe, because I have been living 43 years, that more and more higher sentencing, more and more incarceration is not going to do the trick. And so that's my opinion. We could disagree. We could agree to disagree. But one of the things we need to agree on is that we have to make sure that there is a comprehensive public safety strategy in this city that takes everything into account. Law enforcement is a piece of it, but anybody who believes that law enforcement is a panacea to deal with the gun violence and the issues that are going on in our community, it's just not a comprehensive way to think about it. That's how I look at it. That's the conversation I want to be a part of, and I look forward to any debates we need to have about that. But I don't think, because I believe that having a 10-year mandatory minimum for someone with carrying a gun, that's somehow, because I don't believe that's going to solve the problem, that I'm somehow not considerate and concerned for the mother or the father of someone who lost their life because of gun violence.
Senator Benjamin, we're glad that you got that point out. We cut Sister Aisha off. Sister Aisha, we're running short on time, but we want to give you a chance, about a minute, to kind of finalize your thought there. You're muted.
I just town hall that the 32nd precinct had, community fairs had in my catchment area. So I want to say again, and I've said this for a while, that there is no Band-Aid for to put on a gushing wound, that we have to do real work in our community. We can't just blame the parents. We have to look at also what's happening with policing, because policing makes young people want to act out because they feel like that's their retaliation to do things that are not necessarily law abiding. So I think as a community, we do have to work collectively, but the police cannot expect from a community what it is not truly, sincerely willing to give of itself. So I think that we have to really clear the officers out of our community that don't really want to work there, that have the proof that they don't want to work there by the behavior that they have shown. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Sister Aisha. Lisa?
All right, well, I want to thank our amazing panel for being with us for this town hall, for the Ceasefire town hall. My co-host, Faityn Mohammed. Thank you to Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, Sister Aisha Sekou, CEO and founder of Street Corner Resources, New York State Senator Brian Benjamin from Harlem, community advocate for Tony Herbert. Thank you all for making time for us for this very important issue and these challenges that are facing all of us. We're all in this together. I really believe that. And I want to say a big shout out and thank you to our Hot 97 digital team, everybody that helped us put this all together on the WBLS and Hot 97 side, and all the people behind the scenes that really made this happen. And to everybody that's been in the chats and leaving the comments, we really appreciate it. So I'm going to say, remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. And on behalf of my co-host Faityn Mohammed and I and our WBLS and Hot 97's families, let's push for peace.
There you go. Take care. We'll continue doing this. All right. Take care, everybody. Peace.